Hey there. Starting to see people come on. We'll be starting in a few minutes. I just saw my husband's name. I'm glad he's here to be a part of this, support me. If you are joining with us for the webinar, go ahead and type in the chat. You can tell us where you're from. Hey, Kathy. Lynn from Maryland. Alan from Albania. Yay. Got some internationals on here. Oklahoma City. Owasso, Michigan. Hey, Kristen. Kristen's one of those major contributors to writing the book. Hi, Michelle. Pam from Central South Carolina. Christy from Atlanta. Wow, I'm happy to see all of you on here. Wow, we'll start in 1 minute. So keep them coming. Nova Scotia. Hi, Natalie. Terry, my good friend Terry, thank you for joining us. Pat from North Carolina, Priscilla from Atlanta. Hi, Priscilla. Susan, hi. Some of you I know and others I'm not familiar with, so we're happy to have Heather. Heather David is from Germany. Hi, Heather. She didn't put that down. Seneca, South Carolina. Eric, welcome. Okay. Well, let's get started. It's noon. We're happy to have you join us today. On behalf of Wesleyan Publishing House, welcome to Managing Life Rhythms in the Midst of COVID, featuring the book Unforced Rhythms, Why Daily Devotions Aren't for All of Us. My name is Gwen Jackson. I'm author of Unforced Rhythms and an ordained minister in the Wesleyan Church. Today we're going to be focusing on the concepts of life rhythms and what life looks like for each type of rhythm, especially in the midst of a pandemic when everything has changed. For those listening, feel free to post any questions you might have in the question and answer area on your Zoom screen. We'll try to get to those towards the end of our webinar. Everyone will be able to see your questions, and you can post anonymously if you'd like. Before we get to our panelists, I'd like to give a brief overview of my book and share a little bit more about what life rhythms look like. The book was a long time coming as I, over several decades, kind of worked through what was going on in my heart and mind concerning daily devotions. The book is part memoir and also part practical guidebook. It tells the story, what I call the spiritual angst, especially what it seemed like a Christian marker. So a Christian marker that showed maturity in our Christian life when we would have daily devotions. Certain spiritual practices felt legalistic for me, and I didn't understand why. And so I sought the Lord on this. I asked a lot of questions. I constantly struggled with this tension between a deep desire for intimacy with Christ, which I longed for and felt like I even had. But then there was this other side that felt like I was checking off a spiritual to-do list, and often felt like I was just kind of going through the motions on a daily basis. Though there are several points of freedom in my book, the biggest practical one for me in seeking God on this was to realize that not all of us live to a daily rhythm. I struggled with daily devotions, not because I wasn't a mature Christian, not because I didn't love Jesus and want to spend time with him, but I struggled simply because I wasn't a daily person, and it totally made sense for me. And if you struggle with daily devotions, you can imagine how this simple fact was so liberating for me. So there are 3 life rhythms by which people live life. Life rhythm is how we do life. The first one is daily. The second one is weekly, monthly. And the third one is seasonal, yearly. So let me take a little time just to highlight characteristics of each life rhythm. So the daily rhythm, they love a go-to daily planner. So what does today look like? What's Monday look like? What's Tuesday look like? They're very task-oriented. They want to stay on task. They can accomplish a lot each day if they know what their tasks are and they feel like they know what they're doing. They can get a lot done in a day. They're interested in the now, and they don't like spontaneity. They like to stick with their routine. Then we have the weekly, monthly rhythm. The weekly, monthly rhythm, they love calendars. They are like geeked over calendars, really. And this is my husband, so I know this rhythm well. What month is it? What goals am I working towards to accomplish? So they're very goal-oriented. They love to organize their schedule. They love to set priorities. They enjoy long-term projects. They like sometimes to have a team surrounding them to get that project done. So as long as they're moving forward, not any particular day looks alike, but as long as they're moving forward towards that goal, they're happy. They often like weekends or even like a little break. Sundays can be a break for them from just working on goals and tasks all the time. Let's look at the seasonal yearly rhythm, and this is my own personal rhythm. We like a year at a glance. I can get so overwhelmed by looking at a week or a month. I like to sort of look at the whole picture and what's this year going to look like. They ask, what season or year am I in? What's God doing in my life right now in this season? They're very process oriented. They prefer to sort of, have this big picture perspective. And they're good at even long range planning, even though they're not great planners. They sort of, if there's things happening that fit in and make sense to what's going on in their life and roles, then they like that long range planning. And they're often very creative and artistic as well. So that's just a quick glimpse of each life rhythm. A person feels most effective and productive, satisfied, and content when they're functioning in the rhythm that comes most naturally to them. It will affect the way they do life, how they work, how they even play, how they do ministry, and the way they engage with God. I thought there had to be other believers out there that were struggling and felt the same way as me. And so I wrote the book Unforced Rhythms to share the message of grace and freedom that, God gave me in the message of the book Unforced Rhythms. So that's a quick synopsis on the book. And I want to share with you the panelists that we have on with us today. I am very excited to have 3 panelists, each representing the life rhythm that they align with. I have Justine Teagan. Justine is representing our daily rhythm. and she's going to be sharing why she sees herself aligning with that rhythm. Justine is a discipleship pastor at Alive Church in Charlotte, Central South Carolina, and we're really happy to have you today, Justine. Then our second panelist is Dave Jury. Dave has had many roles throughout his ministry life so far, but currently Dave is Chief of Staff for the Wesleyan Church, and he is representing our weekly, monthly rhythm. And last but not least is Alicia De Cruz. Alicia is a great advocate for the book. She is a seasonal person, yay, because that's what I am. So we sync up with each other. And Alicia is a young adult who is a graduate of Kingswood University and Wesley Seminary. So we're really glad to have you all here with us today to share with us. You're going to add a lot to our webinar. So Justine, why don't you go first and you share why the daily rhythm was like, wow, this is me and who I am.
Yeah, so first read Gwen's book about 2 years ago, and as I was reading it and saw the list of the daily rhythm, it was just me. I could check every one of those things on the list. The idea of someone who loves structure, a daily quiet time has always been something that energizes me. Disliking spontaneity kind of cracks me up because my husband likes spontaneity, so we're always learning how to work outside of our rhythm and adjust there. And so it's, definitely the checklist, the tasks. I have certain days of the week that I do the same thing every week on those days, but then also very routine. I'll eat the same breakfast for, it's probably been 15 years in a row that I've been eating the same breakfast. And so I find a structure and I stick with it and I like it and it seems to work well. And so as I was reading Gwen's book, it made a lot of sense to me. And the other thing that I guess I found helpful thinking through a daily rhythm was knowing at the church where I serve, not everybody connects to God in that way. And so I'm always thinking, how can I think outside of this? I know that not everybody wants daily time. So what does that look like for someone who connects with God a different way? But again, pretty classic daily. If you look at her book on page 117, there's a list. I'm just about everything on that list.
That's great. Thank you, Justine. I hope that helps those listening to identify, am I daily or not? Yeah, by what Justine shared. So Dave, you're our weekly, monthly person. What kinds of things do you see yourself lining with that rhythm?
Yeah, early on, I felt a little bit of angst. You talk about this so well in the book in the first few chapters in the introduction, a little bit of the angst of the pressure to be daily, particularly in church world and with devotional world. And then over time, I started to realize my energy just goes like this throughout a week. And I would have crash times, pastors in particular, whether they're weekly, monthly, or not, there is a weekly rhythm to church life. There's 52 Sundays a year, and you have that rhythm. And so I know as a pastor, I would do Sundays, and then I would come home and I would like take off my dress clothes for church, my church clothes, and I would like lay sometimes like, almost naked, just wiped out from that week. And that was like a sign that like, oh, I definitely have this pattern to me. And some of that is introversion and extroversion as well. But the thing that confirmed it more than anything was just when you describe it so well about the calendar thinking, I am always thinking about what month it is and this sort of chunk of time. I'm overwhelmed. Like some people are overwhelmed when they think of the whole year. I'm overwhelmed like when I think of like a day. If I'm overwhelmed in a day, opposite of Justine, I need to think about the month and what do I got to get done this month. And then on a spiritual level, I almost never have a rewarding experience doing anything daily, any daily readings. I've done a few read through the Bible things, and what I do, this is a hint, by the way, if anybody's ever done those and you don't feel like you're daily, what I found is I would sometimes on a Saturday read the entire week, and then I would even start reading into the next week, and I would like get ahead because I was having such a rewarding experience for like 3 hours, even if I didn't do a devotional time any other day in that week. And I just had this a few weeks ago where I just read each of the resurrection narratives at the end of each of the 4 gospels. And it was such a rewarding time for me to just read sitting on my back porch. And I even like teared up at a moment during that. And I'm not even a real emotional person. And so those are all signs that have shown me that like, oh, I'm wired up differently.
Oh, that's great, Dave. Thanks so much for sharing. Really appreciate it. I hope the listeners are getting a feel for each rhythm as they share, and maybe you're identifying with one of them. So, Alicia, you're a seasonal yearly person. Where do you see yourself aligning with that particular rhythm?
Yeah, I think what was most important when I was first reading the book was reading about that section of the seasonal yearly person, because right in the start of that chapter, I blocked out that like very last paragraph on that page and just wrote, "This is me" in big letters. Just reading about the way that seasonal people look at the big picture. And that is something that I've always kind of done just with my spiritual life, because, I've just looked at a lot of people that I admire or look up to, or just in the way that they are so rhythmic and they're just very consistent in their spiritual life. And I was like, that's not me. I don't know how to do that. I'm not sure if I'll ever become that person. But just reading about the seasonal rhythm really felt like I could have a lot of freedom in, not that I was neglecting my spiritual life, but it helped me to be able to establish where I see those patterns and to be able to pick out those seasons of, okay, I'm looking at the big picture now. What is the theme? What is the lesson that God might be trying to teach me? So I see in one place, God is teaching me to be faithful here, and it might be a few more months before I step into a new season, and I say, oh, faithfulness again. And so it's just kind of these rhythmic patterns of what is it that God's trying to teach me right now. And so so that was definitely something that caught my attention about this. And just I don't tend to like to commit to things, and so that's also part of this rhythm. And so if I don't have to make those immediate decisions right now, like every day, I don't have to say, this is what I'm committing to right now, and this is what I have tomorrow, and this is what because then I get bogged down by that very, systematic, very scheduled, and then that makes me feel like I'm not necessarily living up to the standards that I've set for myself. And so, so it was just a very freeing realization of just what life rhythm and what season I have in my life.
Thank you, Alicia. I think seasonal yearly rhythm is one of the hardest ones to explain because we sort of have this, we just like to live life and find God in the ordinary and in the, just being in his presence in a daily walk. Not that the rest of you aren't, but I think it's, and we like to have that start and finish to things. So it's hard for us to commit to something that's indefinite. So yeah, exactly what you said, Alicia. Thank you so much for sharing that. So you may be wondering which life rhythm you are and which one describes you best. Maybe you already are beginning to point that out as our panelists shared, but at the end of the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to catch a website where you can find a free downloadable life rhythm assessment, which will help to clarify which rhythm you lean into most. But we want to go on with our panelists and ask, how has your particular life rhythm impacted this current COVID crisis time? And like, what kinds of things are you finding messing with your rhythm? Or maybe you're somehow embracing this time because of your rhythm. So let's go back to you, Justine. How has this affected your dailiness?
So COVID is the enemy of daily rhythm people. Especially when routines are changing and things like that. Early on, when it was, I was working from home, then my husband was working from home, and then our daughter's daycare was closed. It just was, a different circumstance to navigate every day.
Yes.
So I had to learn pretty quickly not to put too much pressure on myself, to try to make every day the same, and to try not to look especially at like a single day's routine, looking
Yes.
from one day to the next. One thing I found myself doing was zooming out a little bit. And so where daily devotionals might be tough because, well, now, the house is full at 7 a.m, when before it was empty, or my lunch break is everybody at home instead of just me. So instead of getting stressed out about that, what it looked like on a day-to-day basis, I started to do a little bit more of even what you heard Dave describing, looking for blocks of time throughout the week. I knew on Thursdays, I'm still off on Thursdays, so I could still grab maybe an hour or a little bit of time while my daughter was napping and get some time with God there, or looking at how we like to do Sabbath in our house on Saturday. And so protecting that, the rest of the week can be crazy and my days can look different, but we're still going to stop on Saturday. And so I found a lot of peace in leaning into that zoomed out perspective. And had to embrace a little more grace for myself, as far as the pressure that non-daily people feel trying to lean into daily. I think daily people can feel putting it on themselves, this idea of, I have to do this every day. And so knowing, okay, like I'm not doing this daily, it doesn't mean that I don't love Jesus anymore. So
that's right. Yes, Justine. I would imagine that maybe this pandemic and the isolation and shutdown and lockdown has affected daily people more than any of the 3 life rhythms, because you're so locked into a routine and each day has its own things to do. And so, you've got people working from home, and you can't stick to your routine. It probably feels a little chaotic. So it sounds like you're finding ways to cope, and that's good. So how about you, Dave? How has COVID affected your life rhythm?
Yeah, well, the bad news is Justine says COVID's the enemy of daily people, but it feels a little like the enemy of monthly, weekly people too. I don't know what Alicia's going to say, but I feel like COVID has felt like, and I'll just show a picture of what it feels like to me. It feels like Phil Connor, right? From
Groundhog Day.
Every day feels the same. And that for a monthly, weekly person is really, really irritating. You put it on your slide earlier about spontaneity, and everything doesn't feel spontaneous. It feels redundant. Like even every conversation, I'm sure people are irritated by. You always have to be like, so how's it going in these COVID times? Or everybody has to say like, how are you guys coping with the working at home or the kids doing remote school? And it feels like every conversation's the same. And for a strategic minded monthly, weekly person like me, that's annoying. And it also just feels like everything's a little paralyzed. And one of the benefits of thinking monthly and weekly is you're kind of thinking more like how things are moving, because a lot happens in a week or a month that you can actually look at and see change. And it's hard to see change during COVID. And it's hard to sometimes feel like the stuff you normally do in June, you no longer did in June, right? Like even vacations and things like that. The things you normally do ramping up for fall, even things like sports and movies and entertainment, the stuff that is happening in a certain month doesn't happen in that month anymore or in that week anymore. And so I feel like it's been a real interruption of that. And I've had to step away and sort of address that a little bit more intentionally, because it's been very odd.
Wow. So far, 2 out of 3 find COVID an enemy of their rhythm. So Alicia, how do you see this COVID impacting your rhythm of seasonal yearly?
I think I'll just add the consensus of it definitely as an enemy. I think because seasonal people want the start and finish, like you talked about. And I think that was what was hardest for me, because it was, okay, we're going into lockdown on this day, and it may be on this day that we're getting out. But then it turned into, no, actually it's going to be this day. No, actually it's going to be this day. And so I was kind of like, is this ever going to end? And so,
Yes.
because I was like, you know what, we've been doing this now for 2-3 months, and I'm ready to move on to something new. I'm ready to do something different. I don't like being stuck in my apartment that I was living in at the time. I don't like being conformed to, you have to, like, I wanted the option to say no to things, and I didn't have the option anymore because I could only say no because I didn't really have a choice. And so I think it was mostly that start to finish that I was missing, because I was ready to, I'm ready to be done with this, and I'm ready to move on to the next chapter. I'm ready to see what this new season is going to bring. But also, I think just for my spiritual life personally, it was just kind of this, okay, this is now my new rhythm. This is now my new season. So what is it that God's trying to do? What is it that God's trying to show me now that I have all of this free time? And so,
Yeah.
So that kind of felt like a little switch of life rhythm of, okay, now I've kind of become more of this daily or weekly person. But this new season, what does this season look like for me? So,
Yeah. I can so relate with that. When the first few months, I'm like, because my husband and I travel a lot internationally, and it often starts in May and goes all the way through August. And so it was like, okay, we're going to be home. I can actually plant some tomatoes and keep my flowers alive throughout the summer. But by August, I was like, okay, I'm ready for this to be done. This season should be over, and I'm ready to move on. So yeah, I feel that with you. Well, so much has changed since March, the way we do church, the way we do school, the way we even play, the way we work, and how we approach our jobs. I mean, all that has changed. So just wanted to ask my panelists, how are you combating exhaustion and grief during this time? So like Justine, you like rhythms, you like to-do lists. What's been exhausting for you in this season? And has there been any grief that's come alongside of you during COVID?
Yeah, I think it's been early on, like I said, they're just trying to keep those routines whenever different things were changing every day. That got exhausting. I think it got exhausting trying to maintain what it was. And so when I could let go of what was and lean into what is God doing, and maybe there's a different way to do this. There's a lot of freedom in that. I think the idea of grief, for me, it's not necessarily even combating grief so much as embracing it a little bit. Like when it comes, if there's things that are sad or hard, just trying to talk about that and acknowledge it. The vacations you didn't get to have, or the visit with your family you didn't get to have, or for me being pregnant and my husband can't come to prenatal appointments. It's little tiny things. And then some people have, even bigger things, getting to end of life issues or people they can't visit. And I think just knowing it's okay to be sad and to stop and make space to share. We did lose something, and several things, and that's okay. So for me, I think again, talking about it and then making space. I mentioned earlier, sticking to the routines that I could, especially weekly, especially making sure there's a day where we stop, taking naps when I need it, making sure that there's rest built in the middle of all of the crazy. That kind of seems like it adds a rhythm, just disorganized and chaotic. It's when I find those days here and there.
Thanks, Justine. Those are good thoughts. Good reminders for all of us to keep in mind. Dave, as weekly, monthly, you do like goals and projects and priorities and team. What's been exhausting for you? And has COVID created some grief moments in your life?
Yeah, I think for a planner, Somebody that likes to plan in advance, which I mean, I think every kind of rhythm that might be true of, but I think for a monthly person, even more so.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a cancellation is a big deal. And so when something's canceled, and I've lost track of the things that have been canceled that I would participate in. And then now I had a bunch of things I was actually planning or running have been canceled. I even just this week had an event in January in San Antonio that the venue canceled on me. And so now I've got to figure out, okay, where to do that in a different location. And so it's just, that's frustrating. So kind of grieving that, I'm continuing to go through that. It can be disheartening. And then I like change in my personality. And then I think as a monthly person, I kind of think, okay, how can I adapt to this and think strategically about it? And it's like, you know what? It's really, it's hard when all the change is unintentional instead of intentional change. So it's kind of changes nobody wanted and we're all just dealing with. And so everybody like uses excuses these days. It's sort of like due to COVID is the first thing we say before all bad news. Due to COVID, 2020 is just not going to be good. And so I feel there's some of that. And so I've had to kind of almost put another layer over this season to say, how can I lean in to my monthly approach to things to sort of be strategic, even though the world's not strategic around me, and counter the culture instead of like, oh, now I have to become a daily person like Phil Connors in Groundhog Day. I'm not really in Groundhog Day, right? I don't wake up every morning hearing the same song. So I can actually use my strength and lean into that more, not try to change who I am. And so, so really the like you had on your chart, the prioritization is good for somebody that thinks weekly, monthly. So I can just reprioritize. And so as I've gone more into this season, and it'll help me in the future because when there's a bad season, it doesn't mean I have to throw everything out. It's like, no, I can use my strength to reprioritize. So the griefs I've had, it's just, okay, be intentional to grieve that. And then let's reprioritize now. What do we do now?
Great. You sound so much like a weekly, monthly person, Dave.
Yeah, you happen to live with one. So
yeah.
I know, and I work with them.
Yeah, there you go.
We are the best. I just want to clarify that.
Okay, Alicia, seasonal, yearly, you process life, you like a start and finish to things. You talked a little about that. You're more about experience. What's been exhausting for you as a seasonal, yearly person, and has grief been a part of all this COVID stuff?
Yeah, so going into this season of COVID, a little bit of me, because I was working 2 jobs at the time, so it was kind of a back-to-back thing. So I was just kind of on the go, finishing school. So that was just kind of my rhythm before this happened. And so I think going into it, I was like, okay, this is a new season. I'm going to get to rest, and this is going to be, just a time to just take some time and just breathe a little bit and just kind of have those moments. But then it kind of became this point of, now I feel over rested because I've been able to have so much downtime. And so I feel like the grief set in a little bit of, now I don't have those moments or those options to go and to work a full day or do, things with my friends, to like take up my entire day and to feel that exhaustion at the end of the day and then appreciate my rest. And so in a sense, I was kind of grieving the busyness of my schedule, but also just kind of just trying not to get bogged down by, okay, I feel so just over rested and just, it's just too much now. Also, back in January, February, my sister and I had planned a trip to go see our family in northern Maine, where we're from. And so that kind of all got changed up and switched up. And so there was a little bit of grief there where, just scheduling things and, again, just kind of that start to finish of like, I knew that this was coming up and I knew that I had all these things kind of planned out, but now they're not happening. So just a little grief, like scheduling wise, which sounds interesting for a seasonal person because we like to be kind of bogged down by schedules and things. But I think because I had seen kind of far ahead of what it was that was happening. There was just a little bit of backtracking and a little bit of grief processing with that. So.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. You needed a new season after you rested. You had a rested season and okay, so now this needs to change, and it wasn't changing. So yeah. And because I think seasonal people, sometimes we do have a hard time like giving structure to our day and just being productive and what that looks like. And so I think when we do have a schedule, it kind of keeps us on task. But well, in addition to what our panelists shared, let me share a few other pitfalls and challenges with each rhythm that you might want to watch for during the COVID season. Being aware of your unique life rhythm is important anytime, I think, but don't lose sight of your life rhythm during this time of COVID, when some of us are experiencing isolation, wearing masks, the physical distancing, because your life rhythm, if you lean into it the best you can, it will help keep you sane. So panel, feel free to interject as I share. The daily pitfalls, I think some daily people might have said, hey, I'm going to try to go with the flow in this new reality, and not try to be so structured and routine. But as a daily person, you're not going to feel very efficient if you're just trying to go with the flow. You're going to need to find a routine, and you're going to have to find that in the midst of everyone in the house, if that's the way it is, and kids doing schooling at home. Still try to find yourself somewhat in a routine. And one of the other pitfalls is, sometimes I experience this living with a weekly, monthly person, but not everybody in your family may be daily. And so don't put pressure on them to be so task oriented and measuring their daily quota. Make sure that you're letting them, do their rhythm in the way they do it, and no pressure. Managing the daily, you may need to map out your days. I like what you said, Justine, where instead of a daily devotional time, you're taking Thursdays, which is your day off, to, just give more time in God's presence during that day. So you switched it around, you made it work, and it's part of your routine now on Thursdays. You can make to-do lists with some realistic expectations to the new normal. And then clear, attainable daily goals will keep you focused, and marking off that to-do list always is satisfying for a daily person. So keep doing those things as much as you can in the midst of this time. Weekly, monthly pitfalls. I know from my husband that he was going a little stir crazy in the first month or two. He wasn't going into the office, so he was home more, working from home, but then home all the time. And so we found that giving him some projects to do were helpful, some house projects, some garage projects. It was something that gave him some focus and felt like he was moving forward on some things. Continued having a calendar and setting those priorities. I know something that was helpful for him was prioritizing what's important on that calendar, what can wait, what can be eliminated during this time. He even went as far as cleaning out the spice cupboard. He loves to cook, so organizing the spices was a great project for him. He's got a ton of Zoom meetings internationally and here at home, where he meets with people on Zoom. And so we've been really trying to take some breaks from work for him. We love to hike, and so we've done some local hiking and things like that to sort of get a breather from the constant Zoom and constant study. He even organized his home study, which was helpful. He likes to stand while working, and so he has a high top table that he works from, and we made his study more to fit who he is, as far as not going into the office. So those kinds of things were helpful for the weekly, monthly person. The seasonal, yearly pitfalls, well, I think we tend to feel those as we're processing life. We feel the sadness, we feel the frustration. We're in this new season, but it looks very different. So what does this look like for me? How do I stay productive in this season? Things won't happen as planned, as Alicia shared. This year I had dubbed 2020 the year of celebration, and that meant that we had our youngest daughter getting married in June. We had the whole family, some of them live out of state and out of country, and so the whole family was going to be together for that for the first time in 8 years, where cousins and everybody were all together. Dennis and I were taking the 5 older grandchildren to Yosemite to go hiking, which has been a dream of mine. None of it happened. So I think recognizing those things for the seasonal person and for all of us as well, but those as losses. In the Beatitudes in Matthew, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. I always take that verse to heart, and that we do need to give ourselves time to grieve, and God comes alongside us to give us comfort. And so those are important things. Sometimes we can feel guilty for not doing like all the other family members who are daily or weekly, like they've got their tasks, they're doing their to-do list. Dennis is at his, he's working at his desk, and I'm like, sometimes we seasonal people can look a little lazy, but we're really not. We're really productive. And so we can manage this season in COVID by being creative and artistic, which is something we tend to lean into. Get to things that you maybe haven't gotten to. I've started doing some sewing, crafting, do more reading. I work on a project that kind of fits into the greater picture of your life. I love working on my family tree, and my grandma, who lived to be 100, wrote her life story. So one of the projects I've been working on during this time is typing out her handwritten notes so I can share her story with my family. Give variety to your days, because seasonal people like variety, and do something that you can sort of say, I can start this and have a finish to it. So you have some fulfillment in finishing a project or something you're working on. So those are some thoughts for pitfalls and challenges and how to manage a little bit more of your life rhythm. But let's turn the focus now to our relationship with God. Each life rhythm connects with God in a different way. Daily in that routine, weekly, monthly in those goals that you have set for yourself spiritually, and seasonal, yearly in the processing what God's doing in our lives. How has your relationship with God been challenged during COVID, especially, has the rhythm been messed with? Some of you have shared a little bit on this. What are you doing to stay engaged with God and remain hopeful in a time of adjustment and uncertainty for our future? Is the lack, some of you are, of actually attending church, if that was a normal for you, and maybe church hasn't opened up, or it's still meeting but very different to what the traditional service looked like in the past. How's that affecting your spiritual walk? Justine, share with us, challenges during COVID in your spiritual walk and how you are staying connected to Christ during this time.
Yeah, so the church thing, we are back at church where we are, and we're doing socially distanced and but in person on Sunday mornings. And it's kind of funny because I don't think I realized how being out of church had impacted me until we walked back in. So I'm finding there's been several times where just being in the presence of other people has kind of lowered anxiety. It's easy for things to seem really big at home by yourself, and then being in and around other people with different perspectives has just helped me. The other thing it's given me is this just a perspective of how different the narrative of the church is from the one that we hear all around us. When we come together and we're singing and there's joy and celebration and peace in a community, that's unique right now. And that's not something I'm seeing outside of the walls of the church in mass gatherings. And so that's been kind of a cool, sweet thing. As far as connecting into rhythms, the daily rhythm thing has been a challenge, but letting go of the need to do that every single day has helped me lean into grace in new ways.
Yes.
There's a scripture from Isaiah that just has really spoken to me during this season. It's Isaiah 40:11, and it's talking about the way God is like a shepherd. It says he tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers the lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads those who have young. And so for me, as a mom of a 2-year-old, that's been a huge encouragement, just being reminded that God is gently leading me.
Yes.
And so rather than, putting this expectation, daily connection with God has to look this way. Instead, I'm kind of looking at each day with expectancy of how does God want to connect with me today? Maybe it's not in my morning in the quiet time, but, in a different setting.
Yes.
Quick story on that without getting too long on y'all. Over the summer, my 2-year-old broke her leg, which was a huge bummer, to have a little 2-year-old in the summer with a cast from her hip down to her foot. But what happened in that was, that first day that she was up in the middle of the night and scared, I was able to go in there and pray with her. And then that kind of became a normal thing where she wanted me to pray with her every day before bed. And so, that is a daily thing that has to happen every day. A 2-year-old has to go to bed. So that became this sweet daily moment where I would go in with her and I would pray for her. And then I would say, okay, Kathleen, what do you want to pray for? And she would list off, family members or situations that she didn't know anything about. But I could tell the Holy Spirit was, guiding her already, as far as, one day praying for her daddy. She just wanted God to encourage him, which was I knew what was going on, that was discouraging him. And she had no idea. So, so for me, it wasn't, I didn't sit down and read my Bible that morning, but this sweet moment with my little girl, seeing her connect with God. And so, I guess in that it's just been this encouragement to lean into grace and let God gently lead me, rather than trying to stick with a set structure, because he wants to meet with us. And so he's been faithful, and that to me has been kind of a cool thing, just breaking out of the legalism and leaning into relationship, even when it feels unsettled or unsure, uncomfortable.
That's beautiful, Justine. Thanks so much for sharing the story of Kathleen and how God met you there in a different way than normally that you would connect with God. Thank you. How about you, Dave?
Yeah, it's important, I think, for me, though I embrace my rhythm and I think that it's an important part of who I am. It's not the most important part of who I am, and it's not the most important part of other people or of God. And so, in some sense, the grieving question you asked earlier is important, and it's helped me realize, I can learn through this season too. And it's a bit of this kind of year of Jubilee shift for all of us to sort of reevaluate. And at least as a more monthly oriented person, I can use kind of some of that strategic way of looking at my calendar to say, okay, what does God want to do in September? And it's not what he wanted to do last September, apparently. It's going to have to be different, and to embrace that. And so one of the things that's been good for me is to maybe embrace a new form of Sabbath, as almost all of us worldwide have had to do, to embrace a different way that my monthly rhythms work. I know for me, I get a daily a text that comes through WhatsApp from people from several different nations that a friend of mine named Omar Hato sends to us, several leaders in business life and in church. And that daily text usually isn't mean a whole lot to me. It's not my form because I'm not daily. It's not a
Yeah.
big deal to me. I usually respond with a couple thumbs up and a little praying hands, and that's not much. During COVID, I found that God's speaking to me through that daily thing because I kind of needed it. It uplifts me. And then
Yeah.
obviously COVID is a season. Even people say that. How's it going in this COVID season?
Yeah.
It's a new season all the time. And so I'm kind of having to be forced into the season. And, you know, God is not daily or monthly or weekly or seasonal. He's all that. And God is speaking seasonally right now through a season. And I'm trying to pay attention to that and realize I can't just do my monthly reprioritization. I need to think about like my whole life reprioritized. And so seasonal people are usually actually a little better at that. And so I'm having to think seasonally now. And so is there a hidden gift in this season of making all of us think differently?
Yes.
And letting some of that come naturally. I love the title of your book, Unforced Rhythms. So let's not force it. And I don't even want to force my own way of doing things onto this season or any season, and instead let it come. Now, I will say that certainly a day alone with God and some of those things are even more important. In some cases, there's a little more room for right now. I know I'm one of the only people that shows up to the office every day. And so for me to be away, like, a day out of the office used to be a big deal for my day alone with God every month.
True.
Which, by the way, every monthly, weekly person I think should try that. It means a lot for us.
Yes.
But now it's like no big deal. I could probably do a day alone with God once a week, and people wouldn't bat an eye.
Yeah.
I do think that there's a verse from Lamentations. People often quote it in the King James, but I like it in the New Living. It says, the faithful love of the Lord never ends. His mercies never cease. Great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh. I like that term, afresh every morning. And so for me to just let this season be a mercy to me, not just a burden.
Wow. That's powerful. Thank you so much, Dave, for sharing in that verse. How about you, Alicia? How has this affected your spiritual walk, and how are you choosing to engage with God right now?
Yeah, I think it would be an easy answer to say that, you know, the season has just been kind of easy and just kind of like, well, okay, this is where we are. But in reality, it has been hard, you know, being so isolated and being away from people and away from a regular rhythm of life. And I've found that in the hardest seasons of my life, especially over the last few years, I've seen the way that my spiritual intensity has, you know, just been 10 for, you know, a few months, for however long, just this huge increase of I'm engaged, I'm reading scripture, I'm worshiping, I'm in it like all the time. But then as those seasons kind of, I guess, decrease in intensity, I see the way that as a seasonal person, that intensity of my spiritual life does kind of take this decrease. Not that I've neglected my spiritual life, but it just becomes less of a habitual, of a daily thing. And so I think that, especially in this season, I've just had to remind myself that even if that, you know, I was home, I lived by myself. And so it was just easier to be so fully engaged and just on 10, you know, every single day. Even as that has kind of decreased now, where I moved away from where I was living and now I'm in kind of a newer season of life. God's presence hasn't left me just because that spiritual intensity has maybe gone down. And so as, you know, as a seasonal person, as you said, for the pitfalls, we can feel guilty that we're not still, you know, at a 10 every single day or throughout the entire rhythm. And so just learning that, you know, no, I might not be at that same level of intensity, but God is still with me. God is still faithful. God is still, you know, answering prayers, and he's, you know, he hasn't gone away from me. And so that, just reading the book overall was just such a freeing concept for me, because I always felt that decline, that decrease, and then beat myself up for it because, you know, this was just so prevalent in my life a week ago why is it not the same right now? And so, so just being able to see the way that I'm still connected, I'm still in that rhythm, even though it might not be at the intensity that it was 3 or 4 months ago. So,
yes, it's great. That's such a great perspective, especially for a seasonal rhythm, because we do tend to sort of have these high times and then lower times, but the high time will come again. And just what you said, Alicia, just knowing that God's faithful and present in the midst of the highs and the lows and the productive and not feeling so productive. That is such a great takeaway for the seasonal person. Well, thanks, panelists. I trust our listeners have gained insights from your life and experiences during this COVID time and learning more about the life rhythms. Before we get to some questions, the whole book on Force Rhythms really is sandwiched in the verse Matthew 11:28 through 30. And many of you know that by come to me, all you who are heavy and now I'm not going to be able to say it because I know it so well through the message, but come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle in heart, and my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And in the message, where I got the title of the book, Learn the Unforced Rhythms of Grace. And it says, Jesus says, keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. And when I was trying to live in a daily box, I didn't feel like I was living so freely and lightly because I felt this guilt and condemnation and just beat myself up a lot. And living in my seasonal yearly rhythm truly has given me a freer and lighter walk with Christ. That grace of his is so great, so special. So we have a few questions. Someone asked, do most people who are married feel like they have balance in their marriage because their spouse is a different rhythm? I don't know if the word's balance. I think it's understanding your spouse's rhythm. I've taught this in numerous venues, and when I have both husbands and wives in the room, and then I have them split up into which rhythm they see themselves in, and I have a wife over here in daily and a husband over here in seasonal, and she says, I didn't think he was very spiritual because he never did his daily devotions. And he said, every time you walked into your prayer closet, I felt guilty, So I think it's understanding in marriage how those rhythms work and appreciate that and celebrate it in each other, and know that you both are engaging with God in your unique, natural way. I don't know if that answers the question. Do any of the panelists, if you can see the questions there, have any thoughts on what it's like to be married to a different rhythm? I think go ahead, Dave, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I think that this is all of it. In fact, Jason asked a similar, gave a story in the chat also about it. It's just when we interact with people with different rhythms in our workplace, in our marriage, or our friendships, or in our church, it's not about superiority and how we engage it. It's a little bit like how Paul wrote about the spiritual gifts. The eye cannot say to the foot, I don't need you. And so we need each other. And I think we can learn from each other, and we wouldn't want to overextend it to make it seem like a hierarchy, or for us to act like we can only learn from God or connect with God in one way. We need a diversity of expressions. And the way I even responded to Jason in there was that, Scripture's full of all sorts of expressions of different kinds of rhythms, and the Hebrew calendar is full of it. And so we need to kind of be open to how God might communicate with us, not just emphasize how we want to communicate with God. So God can show up however he wants to, and it's about submitting to him, not God submitting to my rhythm. At the same time, God is so merciful, new every morning, right? That he tends to speak to me according to my rhythm. That's not because I'm great. That's because God's great.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. So second question here, do you think you can be not fully one kind of life rhythm? Can you be a seasonal person, but also have seasons where you look daily and seasons where you look weekly, monthly? Or is it a matter of still needing to really discover your own rhythm? I would say that I think for me personally, I look back on my life and totally can see the seasonal yearly rhythm playing out, even as a young girl. But then I do hear other people talk about that it can change for them. That's okay. I think, but you said, can you be a seasonal person, but also have seasons where you look daily? So yeah, I think the seasonal person can choose to say, I'm going to try to be daily for 2 months. And I'm going to try to spend daily time with God. I think if you're truly seasonal, you may not last the 2 months on a daily devotionals, effort. But you can have seasons where you might look more like another rhythm. But because seasonal people do like a start and a finish, and we might say in this season, this is what it's going to look like. But I am so non-routine. And I don't plan my day out a lot. I get up in the morning and say, what's this day going to look like for me, and sort of think through it. I have some things scheduled, not everything's scheduled, but I may decide to go for a run, but tomorrow I might not. So I think that you probably lean into one the most. And then if you want to have a season where you're looking a little more daily, if God's leading you to be daily, if God's leading you to be a little more weekly, monthly, go for it. Anybody else in that light of that question?
I would say as a seasonal person, that would definitely be true for me. I think at the core of who I am, I'm definitely in the seasonal rhythm because I just see those as kind of established patterns. But I might have a 2-week period of I'm going through this study, or I decided to read this book of the Bible, or I decided, whatever I might have thought out, like I've been thinking on this for months maybe, and then I finally picked a time frame to do it in. Last the entire 2 weeks, or it might not last the entire 2 months. But yeah, I would say that it's possible, but I think that at the core of who we are in our spiritual lives, in our walks with the Lord, I think that there is a core rhythm that we stick to overall.
Yeah, great. Well, we're just about at closing time here, and I want to stay on time. Someone asked about the little voices that may play tricks on our head. For those who aren't daily, like maybe I need to be better at this rhythm because, yeah, the enemy throws little thoughts in our head sometimes. But I always try to look at it this way. If it's a condemning thought, it isn't from God. Romans 8:1 says, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. So I like to think of, if it's convictional, I like to think of the difference, because condemning, when you feel accusation, that isn't from God, that's from the enemy of our souls. When you feel conviction, God does it in a very loving way and says, I'm going to come alongside of you to help you shape this in your life. But if it's a little voice that's being accusing and condemning, you need to tell it to go to its proper place. It doesn't belong. Can't stand in God's truth. I don't see my life rhythm, and I would imagine the panelists would agree, changing after COVID. I kind of think it's like right now the Enneagram's a big thing, and personalities. We kind of are who we are, and yeah, that can change up according to life and stages and all that. But I see myself staying pretty seasonal after COVID. How do I know if I'm living out of a rhythm, or if it's me who needs to accept the rhythm I currently have? I think if you take the assessment and find out what rhythm you lean into most, you'll be able, and once you identify that, lean into what your rhythm is. And you may have been ingrained to be daily or whatever, but give yourself lots of grace and that mercy that Dave talked about, that's new every morning, to lean into what is most satisfying, most efficient for you in your spiritual walk and in the roles that you have in your life. Well, thank you so much for watching our webinar today. I want to thank the panelists again for their contribution to this discussion. If you'd like to discover what your life rhythm is, you can take a free rhythm assessment, as I mentioned, available on my website, and that should be up on the screen. And you can also purchase my book, Unforced Rhythms, from that website as well. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day. Thank you, everybody.